It was a scorching summer afternoon at the prestigious Oakwood Country Club, where membership costs more than most people's annual salary. The pristine swimming pool sparkled under the blazing sun, surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and luxury cabanas. Marcus Thompson, a 15-year-old African-American teenager, sat quietly by the pool's edge, his AP chemistry textbook open on his lap. Despite the heat, he maintained his composed demeanor, occasionally taking notes while glancing at the peaceful water. The tranquility was shattered when Karen Whitfield, a well-known club member notorious for her entitled behavior, stormed toward Marcus. Her designer sundress fluttering in the warm breeze, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, and a look of determination etched across her face. "Excuse me," she announced loudly, causing several heads to turn. "I need to see your membership card immediately." Her voice dripped with suspicion and barely concealed contempt. Marcus looked up from his textbook, maintaining his composure. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm a member here. Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," Karen snapped, her voice rising. "I've never seen you here before, and I know everyone at this club. Where did you get that membership card?" By now, other poolgoers had started to take notice. Some reached for their phones, sensing the brewing confrontation. A young mother quickly ushered her children away from the scene, while others watched with a mix of discomfort and morbid curiosity. "Ma'am, I've been a member here for 3 years," Marcus replied calmly, though his hands slightly trembled as he reached for his backpack. "I'd be happy to show you my card, but I don't appreciate your tone." Before Marcus could retrieve his membership card, Karen waved over Trevor, the security guard who had been watching the situation unfold. "Trevor, this young man claims to be a member. I've never seen him before, and I'm concerned about the safety of our members." Trevor, a middle-aged man in a crisp security uniform, approached with a practiced neutral expression. However, his hand instinctively rested on his radio, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes about his presumptions. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification," Trevor stated firmly, positioning himself between Marcus and Karen. Marcus's heart raced, but his voice remained steady. "Of course, officer. But I want to point out that I've been coming here regularly, and Mrs. Johnson at the front desk can verify my membership. I'm also curious why I'm being singled out when there are dozens of people here who haven't been asked to show their credentials." Karen's face flushed red. "Don't you dare play the race card. This is about security, not race. This is an exclusive club, and we have standards to maintain." By now, a small crowd had gathered, most filming with their phones. Some murmured in disapproval of Karen's behavior, while others nodded in agreement with her demands. Marcus stood up slowly, gathering his books. "I understand your concern for security, but this feels like profiling. I'm a straight-A student at Wellington Prep, and my family has been members here since." "I don't care if you're the president's son," Karen interrupted. "Trevor, if he can't produce a valid membership card right now, I want him removed from the premises. And I want his supposed membership investigated." Trevor shifted uncomfortably, but maintained his professional demeanor. "Sir, please show me your membership card now, or I'll have to escort you to the office." Marcus took a deep breath, remembering his mother's words about handling discrimination with dignity. He reached for his backpack again, but Karen's next words made him freeze. "I'm calling the police," she declared, pulling out her phone. "This is exactly why we need to be vigilant. Who knows what he could be planning?" The crowd grew larger, and the tension became palpable. Some members began to voice their opinions. "This is ridiculous. Leave the kid alone. Better safe than sorry. Someone should call management." Marcus stood his ground, despite his racing heart. "Ma'am, I suggest you think carefully about making that call. You're making assumptions based on—" "Don't you dare threaten me." Karen's voice reached a shrill pitch. "Trevor, do something. He's being aggressive." Trevor placed his hand more firmly on his radio. "Sir, please come with me to the office now." The situation was reaching a boiling point. Phones continued recording, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The summer air felt thick with tension, and the once peaceful pool area had transformed into an arena of modern-day prejudice. Little did Karen know, her actions were about to backfire spectacularly. As she dialed her phone with trembling fingers, a black SUV pulled into the club's circular driveway, and a figure emerged that would change everything. The black SUV's doors swung open, and Governor Sarah Thompson emerged, her commanding presence immediately drawing attention. She was still in her business attire, a tailored navy suit and sensible heels, having come straight from a legislative session. Her security detail flanked her as she strode purposefully toward the pool area, her expression darkening as she took in the scene before her. What exactly is going on here? Governor Thompson's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Karen, still clutching her phone, turned toward the voice and froze. The color drained from her face as she recognized the most powerful person in the state. Trevor, the security guard, immediately straightened his posture, his hand dropping from his radio. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, relief evident in his voice. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karen's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the concrete. The crowd collectively gasped, and the phones recording the incident shifted to capture this dramatic turn of events. "Marcus," Governor Thompson acknowledged her son before turning her steel gaze to Karen. "Would someone care to explain why my son is being harassed while trying to study?" Karen's mouth opened and closed several times, no words coming out. Trevor took a step back, suddenly finding great interest in his shoes. The crowd, which had been murmuring throughout the confrontation, fell into stunned silence. We were just conducting a routine security check." Karen finally stammered, her previous confidence evaporating. "A routine security check?" Governor Thompson's voice was calm but carried an edge that made everyone within earshot wince. "Is it routine to threaten to call the police on a teenager doing his homework? Is it routine to assume someone doesn't belong based on the color of their skin?" She stepped closer to Karen, her heels clicking on the concrete. "I've been watching the live stream for the past 5 minutes, Mrs. Whitfield. Yes, I know exactly who you are. Your husband's firm handles state contracts, doesn't it?" Karen's face, already pale, turned almost ghostly. The mention of her husband's business connections with the state government clearly hit home. Governor Thompson turned to Trevor. "And you, sir? Instead of de-escalating the situation, you chose to validate this discriminatory behavior. How long have you worked here?" 3 years, ma'am, Your Excellency." Trevor managed to reply, sweat visible on his forehead despite the pool's cooling mist. Marcus stood tall now, no longer the threatened teenager but the composed young man his mother had raised him to be. He pulled out his membership card, platinum level, with the Thompson family name clearly embossed in gold. "I believe this is what you were demanding to see," he said, holding it up but not handing it over. "Though I doubt it would have made a difference earlier." The crowd had grown larger, with club members emerging from the clubhouse and restaurant to witness the unfolding drama. Phones continued recording, and several people were already posting on social media. #Oakwood incident was trending locally within minutes. Governor Thompson surveyed the scene, her expression both sad and determined. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is exactly why I pushed for the Equality in Public Spaces Act last month. This kind of discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's becoming illegal in our state." She turned to address the growing crowd directly. "My son has been a member of this club since he was 12. He's a straight-A student, a volunteer at the Children's Hospital, and yes, he likes to study by the pool on hot days. But he shouldn't have to list his accomplishments to justify his presence here. No one should." Karen, finally finding her voice, attempted damage control. "Governor Thompson, I sincerely apologize. I had no idea. If I had known he was your son." "That's precisely the problem, Mrs. Whitfield," Governor Thompson interrupted. "I just heard. This is completely unacceptable. I assure you will launch a full investigation." "Oh, we're well past investigations, Mr. Peterson," Governor Thompson replied. "I've already spoken with the Attorney General's office. They're very interested in reviewing this club's membership approval patterns over the past 5 years." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Several board members who had joined the spectators shifted uncomfortably. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice steady and clear. "Mom, I don't want anyone to lose their job over this. But something needs to change. Governor Thompson placed a hand on her son's shoulder, pride evident in her expression. Something will change, Marcus. Starting right here, right now. She addressed the crowd one final time. Tomorrow morning, I'm holding a press conference at the state capitol. I expect representatives from Oakwood Country Club to be there. We're going to have a very public conversation about very private prejudices. As mother and son walked toward the exit, followed by their security detail, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Karen stood rooted to her spot, her designer sundress now wrinkled from her nervous fidgeting. Trevor had already disappeared, presumably to update his resume. The afternoon sun continued to shine on the pristine pool, but something had fundamentally shifted at Oakwood Country Club. As people began to disperse, their phones still clutched in their hands, they knew they had witnessed not just a confrontation, but a moment of transformation. Little did they know this was just the beginning. The mahogany-paneled office of Oakwood Country Club had never felt so small. At 9 a.m. the next morning, an emergency meeting was underway, with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Around the massive conference table sat the club's board of directors, legal counsel, Mr. Peterson the manager, and much to her visible discomfort Karen Whitfield. Security footage from multiple angles played silently on the wall-mounted screen, showing yesterday's incident in excruciating detail. Karen winced each time her recorded self gestured aggressively toward Marcus. The media presence outside is substantial, Mr. Peterson reported, tugging at his collar. We've counted representatives from all major networks, and the hashtag Oakwood incident has over 2 million impressions. Bernard Winchester III, the board's chairman, removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. In my 30 years on this board, we've never faced a PR disaster of this magnitude. The governor's press conference begins in 2 hours, and we need a response strategy immediately. The club's legal counsel, Sarah Thompson, cleared her throat. We've received notice that the Attorney General's office is launching a formal investigation into our membership practices. They're requesting documents going back 5 years, including all rejected applications with demographic information. A collective groan echoed through the room. Everyone knew what those records would reveal. Furthermore, Chin continued, 3 civil rights organizations have already contacted us regarding potential class action lawsuits. The security footage has been subpoenaed and Enough! Karen suddenly burst out. This is ridiculous. I was trying to protect our club. How was I supposed to know he was the governor's son? The room fell silent. Bernard fixed her with an icy stare. Mrs. Whitfield. That statement perfectly encapsulates why we're in this mess. The fact that you believe your behavior would have been acceptable if directed at any other young person of color is precisely the problem. Outside, reporters continued to gather. Satellite trucks lined the pristine streets of the exclusive neighborhood, their antennas reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Club members arriving for their morning tennis matches or breakfast were forced to navigate through a gauntlet of cameras and microphones. Mr. Peterson's phone buzzed. Another membership cancellation notification. We've lost 37 members since last night. Corporate sponsors are beginning to distance themselves. The annual charity gala committee just called. They're considering another venue. The door opened and Trevor, the security guard, was escorted in. He had been waiting outside, still in his uniform, though it seemed unlikely he'd be wearing it much longer. I've worked security for 15 years, he began, his voice shaking slightly. I've never had a complaint filed against me. I was just following protocol. Bernard interrupted. Was it protocol to immediately assume guilt? To threaten removal without proper verification? To ignore our actual security procedures in favor of profiling? Trevor's shoulders slumped. He knew his position was untenable. Sarah Chun spoke up again, shuffling through papers. We need to get ahead of this. I propose immediate actions. First, a public apology. Second, the creation of a diversity and inclusion committee. Third, a review and overhaul of all membership policies. Fourth, that won't be enough, a new voice interrupted. All heads turned to see Robert Marshall, the club's youngest board member and its only person of color. We need radical change, not just window dressing. I've been pushing for this for years, but now we have no choice. He stood, commanding the room's attention. We need to acknowledge our history of exclusion, create a substantial scholarship program for underprivileged youth, implement mandatory bias training for all staff, and yes, revoke certain memberships. His eyes flickered to Karen, who seemed to shrink in her chair. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward the governor's press conference. Outside, the media presence continued to grow. Phones around the table lit up with notifications as social media exploded with new developments. Someone had leaked the security footage. Mr. Peterson's assistant burst in. Sir, Governor Thompson's office just sent over their demands. They're extensive. The list was projected onto the screen, and the room fell into stunned silence. The changes required weren't just cosmetic, they were foundational. The very culture of Oakwood Country Club would have to transform. We have no choice, Bernard finally said, his voice heavy with resignation. We either evolve or we die. The world is watching, and yesterday's incident was merely the catalyst for what should have happened years ago. He turned to Karen. Mrs. Whitfield, the board will be reviewing your membership this afternoon. I suggest you make arrangements to remove your personal belongings from your locker. Karen stood, tears in her eyes. My family has been members here for 4 generations. Perhaps, Robert Marshall replied. That's part of the problem. As the meeting continued, decisions were made that would reshape one of the city's oldest institutions. The consequences of one woman's prejudice were rippling out, touching not just an afternoon by the pool, but the very foundations of systemic privilege. In less than an hour, Governor Thompson would take the podium at the state capitol, but the real changes were already beginning. In this wood-paneled room, where the guardians of tradition were finally facing the future, the question wasn't whether Oakwood would change, but whether it could change fast enough to survive. The newly renovated entrance of Oakwood Country Club gleamed in the morning sun. Gone was the imposing gate that had once symbolized exclusivity. In its place stood a welcoming archway with the club's new motto, Excellence through Inclusion. Inside the grand ballroom, Governor Sarah Thompson stood at the podium, addressing a diverse crowd of members, media, and community leaders. The occasion, the official launch of the Oakwood Youth Leadership Program. 6 months ago, an ugly incident brought us here. She began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. Today we celebrate not just change but transformation. What could have remained a moment of shame has become a catalyst for progress. In the front row, Marcus sat proudly beside Robert Marshall, now the club's first African-American president. The changes had been swift and comprehensive. The membership committee had been completely restructured, with clear, transparent criteria replacing the old system of sponsorships and secret ballots. A scholarship program now provided membership opportunities to talented young people from underserved communities. The staff, from management to maintenance, reflected the diversity of the city they served. Our membership has actually grown, Robert Marshall would later tell reporters. We lost some old members, yes, but we gained hundreds of new ones who share our vision for the future. The club's transformation had rippled through the community. Other exclusive institutions, seeing Oakwood's success, began their own reform processes. The state legislature, inspired by the incident, passed comprehensive anti-discrimination laws for private clubs and organizations. Karen Whitfield, whose membership had indeed been revoked, had undergone her own transformation. After months of reflection and mandatory sensitivity training, a condition of her husband's firm maintaining its state contracts, she now led anti-bias workshops at local businesses. Her story of change, though initially met with skepticism, became a powerful testament to the possibility of personal growth. Trevor, the former security guard, had found a new calling. After completing extensive training in diversity and security management, he now consulted with organizations on implementing equitable security practices. His first-hand experience of how not to handle situations made him an invaluable teacher. But perhaps the most significant change was visible in the young faces scattered throughout the ballroom. The Oakwood Youth Leadership Program, Marcus's brainchild, paired privileged teens with peers from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Together, they worked on community service projects, developed leadership skills, and broke down the barriers that had divided their city for generations. "Mom," Marcus whispered to Governor Thompson after her speech, "remember when you said something would change? I don't think either of us imagined this much change." Sarah Thompson smiled at her son, now a junior and president of his school's diversity council. Change, when it comes, can be like a flood or like a seed. This was both, a flood that cleared away the old, and a seed that grew into something beautiful. The event continued with tours of the renovated facilities. The pool area where it all began now featured a wall of photographs celebrating the club's diverse membership through the years. Children of all backgrounds splashed together in the water, their laughter a symphony of unity. In the newly established community room, local organizations held meetings free of charge. The tennis courts hosted clinics for inner-city youth. The dining room served dishes from around the world, prepared by chefs who represented various culinary traditions. As the day drew to a close, Governor Thompson found herself back at the pool, standing in almost the same spot where she had confronted discrimination 6 months earlier. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, approached her shyly. "Are you Marcus's mom?" the girl asked. "He teaches me swimming on Saturdays. He says anyone can belong here now." Sarah Thompson knelt down to the girl's level. "That's right. And do you feel like you belong here?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Everyone does. My best friend lives in a big house, and I live in an apartment, but here we're just swimmers." As the sun set over Oakwood Country Club, its rays reflected off the water, creating a shimmer of hope. The transformation wasn't just about policies or programs. It was about changing hearts and minds, one person at a time. The incident that had threatened to tear the community apart had instead brought it together, proving that sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most profound healing. And somewhere in the city, a former member named Karen Whitfield was preparing for tomorrow's workshop, ready to share her story of how confronting privilege and prejudice had led to her own transformation. Because in the end, the story of Oakwood wasn't just about institutional change. It was about the capacity of human beings to grow, learn, and become better versions of themselves.